Thank you very much, Geoff. It's good to see you and Warren and Kevin and everybody. We've got a special guest that I'll be talking to and kind of having a conversation with about this idea of what I call and what I've heard other people call color metadata that we generate sometimes in pre-production with the creation of a color palette along with the art department and a show LUT. And then when we perform live color on set. So kind of coming a little bit from the perspective of the camera department during production. And we're very lucky to have with us as well, Mr. Charlie Anderson, who is a well-known DP and also often and for many years a DIT, famously has a great site called Dork in a Tent that we reference often in our, hi Charlie, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys. How's it going?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. And just to give a brief intro, you know, Charlie is a DP with a number of feature-length films, lots of music videos, commercials, but originally got his start as a DIT in New York, and you know, known for his eye for color in particular, and has also worked as a colorist, and has, you know, worked with people like Reed Morano and Rodrigo Prieto and people like that. And we wanted to talk about kind of the current state, because I always am interested, I don't get on to set as often as I'd like to, about the current state of the generation of this color metadata often. And I'll just to put a stake in the ground and kind of show what we're talking about, I'm going to share my screen briefly just to kind of give people an idea of what type of scenario we're talking about. And this is a very simplified version of a classic on-set color workflow where we take the clean log signal from the camera into some kind of a LUT box. In this case, I put a Teradek Color Duo, but it could be any number of other LUT boxes, the Fujifilm IS Mini. And then we send that clean log signal is intercepted by a computer, generally a laptop running Pomfret LiveGrade, which a DIT or on-set colorist, or sometimes they can be called a dailies colorist even, will manipulate a base look or create a look from scratch, you know, in real time while we're shooting. And then that signal goes to the, you know, the hero monitor, the reference monitor on set that everyone's rallying around to understand what we want this to look like. And then typically also would carry on in the clean form or be intercepted and DA'd prior to hitting the LUT box so that we can preserve the clean log signal for observing its waveform trace or applying false color or any number of other signal analysis tools or approaches. So hopefully everyone's kind of familiar with that, or at least understands that that's something that happens. And with that said, I wanted to bring in Charlie to tell us, like, what do you currently see as the state of on-set color and how this color metadata is generated?
Well, thanks for having me. As like you said, I've been DITing for many years, been a DP for the past 10 years or so. And the state of which I'm seeing a lot of things happen is a lot of what you've just described, of just having that workflow of a non-destructive color pipeline, essentially, that comes in, camera shoots log or raw or however we're monitoring in log, protecting for the protecting the image for the camera negative in a log sense and whatnot. So that way it's either the DP or the director, whoever wants to keep like a clean image or whatever, we're protecting with that, so that way we can have we can manipulate later on as need be for post-production. Everything that we're doing on set is typically run through LUT boxes, like you described, doing CDLs with that are essentially the order of operation is CDL on log color saturation, then your show LUT, so you're not working off of a contrasted curved image. And therefore all that stuff can be sent to post-production either through Daly's Colorist or just it could be generated on set. I've done that too for commercials, and then that's just then passed along to editorial or production where they can use that just for, you know, putting together rough edits or anything of that nature. And then they'll also have all that data later on when they go to do the final online and whatnot. Majority of the time, the online is the stuff that's generated on set and dailies and whatnot. Typically isn't used from my experience, but it's a good starting point in which, you know, an online colorist can essentially say, oh, this is where they were going for the scene. Let me start there. I'll do my own thing. But it's because they'll have a lot more control over everything in post. Whereas like me being on set, having just CDL saturation, or even with ACES or something like that is it's easier to just get us 90% of the way there, which is ultimately my task, is to try to get as close as possible to whatever the cinematographer is looking for.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's an important point. And so this, I think you could properly call it metadata, is generated sometimes as granularly as at the take level. And so what are some of the mechanisms well, first I wanted to, you mentioned ACES, and first I wanted to sort of ask if you're seeing an uptick in the use of ACES on set, just in general.
I only really use it for masterclass. That's really the only class that the only time I've ever seen it really used. I know some cinematographers like to use it.
That's exactly where I saw it as well. As Vanya Cerul was a big proponent of starting with the IDT and then going off of that.
Yeah, I like what it's doing. You definitely have a lot more control. I think it looks like a better image per se, but it has its ups and downs. It has the pros and cons. And in terms of speed, it's not faster, in my opinion, but it looks better. And I think you have more control over it.
And I think certainly it's more consistent if you have multiple cameras with good, well-supported, provided manufacturer IDTs. You can get them a lot closer than the time it would take to do that, you know, with CDL alone, perhaps. Yeah. So then, how is that metadata, or how is that you know, take potentially shot or take specific look associated with the clip file info, just for our audience members who may wonder, like, you know, how does it stay with the footage all the way without being, you know, again, without being burned in, so that we're not compromising the original camera file?
Sure. So essentially that is passed along. I tend to have a clip identifier system that's just, you know, identifying what the CDL is based on what camera it was with an underscore, and then what scene it was. So like, you know, B camera underscore 22 Apple underscore whatever the episode is. So 103 or something like that. And then the time of day in an hour, minute, second methods. That way, if you're making multiple different versions of it for, like, say, you know, say on the first take, it's fine or whatever. But then the sun comes out for take 2 or 3, and then you want to like cool it off to match what it was when it was in the shade. That is like, you know, I'll typically do like underscore take 1, take 2. That way it's based on those variables. So that way the post can identify, oh, this is for this sequence. I've had some requests for a syncing time code, but typically just doing it based off of camera, scene, and take, if you need to, is fine. Because a lot of the times it's just 1 or 2 shots, sometimes more. Like on the case of when we were working on Maisel, sometimes we do upwards of 20 takes on a scene. But typically it's not going to change for the most part, with the exception of like adding in filtration or of that sort of stuff. And the reason I started doing that was just to kind of help keep track of things a few years ago. And I actually started mandating bringing higher quality filtration. So that way, in the event of having to switch filters, you're not going to be adjusting green shift like right before we go and everything's matching and whatnot. So I try to go for the true ND filters, or Firecrest, essentially is what I try to go for.
Right. And you find those are pretty camera agnostic, and they tend to give you consistent results across different imagers?
Correct. Yeah. For the most part, the true NDs are fantastic all the way across. The Firecrest, you start to see a little bit of a shift once you get past the 1.2, like 1.5, 1.8, 2.1, when you get into the higher variants. But it's minimal. It's not the green shift you would get with, like, say, a Schneider or a Tiffin with the green and whatnot. So,
so is that so that process of using that kind of identifier system is kind of, you can think of it as another piece of metadata. Is that recorded, like, is that a manual process, or do you use a
yes.
tool like SilverStack sometimes, or?
Yeah, so LiveGrade is the preferred tool to use and has been, I think, for quite a while. A lot of all that stuff is entered in manually, and the nice thing about it is they've now implemented a I guess, a web app called ShotHub, in which, if you want to, I'm currently working on a show, and we're myself and the other I'm alternating with another DIT, and he is we're using ShotHub as a way to keep our notes in sync, because I'm using my computer, he's using his computer, and therefore, like, I can't necessarily, I'm not at the point now with ShotHub where I can apply what he's doing. I could just see what he's doing, and, like, all the additional, like, adjustments, the CDL color adjustments, what LUTs are on there, that kind of sort of thing. And that's extremely helpful for trying to match different scenes. Because if I'm working with one TP, he's like, hey, can we use this thing that we did before? And if he hadn't sent me all the look files or the cubes or the CDL files, everything like that, on a Dropbox one, I would have zero idea what was going on. So just trying to keep everything in sync between the two of us has been has been great for this, exactly what you're saying, like metadata of, like, okay, well, what's being used here? How is this being done? What's the color temperature? What did we do? All that stuff is when you can enter it in manually, and some cameras will do, if you're talking directly to the camera via CDL server or something like that, you can then sync that automatically, and you don't have to enter it in. But I typically enter it in every take. So.
Interesting. And so then once all this information, some CDL values typically that are made under or in front of perhaps a show LUT, and then the information to associate them with atomically with a clip file. How is that packaged and stored, and how does that make its way from set to kind of the next person in the chain?
It's super simple. Everything goes on a thumb drive, which is great. So typically I'll hand off a thumb drive with reference stills of what I'm taking, so that way a colorist or a dailies colorist can then use those stills as a reference. Like, oh, this actually just happened the other day where we had an issue where one of my LUT boxes accidentally put itself into extended mode and not into video mode, and therefore I got an email saying, like, hey, these stills don't match up to the CDLs, and it's like, oh, let me do some troubleshooting, and then realized that somehow it got factory reset to whatever that was, or a setting got changed somehow. I'm not sure exactly how, but we were able to do that. But as opposed to just applying the CDL and saying, oh, hey, this doesn't match or whatever, like, they can physically see, like, oh, this is what it should look like. Here's everything that's coming from set. And most often than not, like, if for some reason the CDLs don't match up for whatever reason, we always say go off of what the stills look like, because that's essentially what the DP is looking at. And that's what they're used to seeing. And that's what obviously they're going for. There are times where they're, super dim lighting or certain super specific color temperature, that kind of stuff. And if that doesn't get passed along with the CDL, then it's typically not there. But that's usually passed along. I export everything on a thumb drive. I hand it to the loader who's doing all the downloading of the media within SilverStack, and then it just goes onto the file structure of the shuttle drive that's going to post-production.
Got it. So we had a question come in the chat, I think is a good one. And they're asking, Pedro is asking, how would you do integration between onset grading, post-color grading, and specifically VFX? Like, how does the VFX component of a shot contribute to this, or how is that wrinkle sort of handled in your experience?
So that is typically done most often than not done by VTR, the video playback, or 24 frame playback, mainly because what we're doing on set is more about color and color accuracy. So everything I'm doing is, if I'm getting the image first, I'm doing the adjustments, the applications, the making the changes. Then I'm sending that colored image down the pipeline to a VTR person. That person is then using QTake to do the key, do the match, all that sort of stuff. He or she has an ability to do a little bit of tweaking, but typically if they need tweaking based on the VFX stuff, I can then adjust on my end, so that way he or she will be able to do it there, and they'll have the matching color. So typically I'm working right next to VTR, and we're having a conversation about, okay, let's match this. It needs to be a little bit warmer, a little bit more saturated, a little bit less, more contrast, that sort of thing.
Cool. Couple of questions that came in kind of about the set, onset, near set, and then actual post. And so what's the idea? Have you ever used conducted your hardware or the hardware that may have been rented, like the LUT box itself, with a show LUT and perhaps other metadata in it? Like, has that ever gone to post as a piece of hardware to be utilized, to be patched in somewhere in the signal chain later on?
Not necessarily. The only time that I've ever, because I normally use box IOs. I also have some IS minis, and I have a couple color boxes that I have a show LUT like built into it, because those devices will retain, has memory built into it, and they will be able to retain whatever's last applied. So in terms of sending it somewhere, not necessarily. I would say nearly all post houses have the ability to read a cube, a 33 by 33 cube file, show LUT, or whatever it is that they're looking at. So like, I'll just normally send them the file with reference stills and all that stuff. For anything of that nature, like I will, before the Teradek wireless video systems were able to put in cube files directly into the transmitters, into the receivers, I used to just take a color box or an IS mini and just put some Velcro on it onto an assistant's monitor or a director's monitor of that sort, and then they're able to view the LUT right there and that. But now a lot of like small HD monitors have that sort of those things built in. The Teradeks have it built in, everything of that nature. So it's a lot easier now to be able to have a colored or LUTted image pretty much anywhere on set. Whereas before it was either coming through me, or I'd have an extra LUT box to slap on a monitor if I needed to.
Right, because you're not necessarily responsible for the each Video Village monitor context being up, but you typically, I imagine, would feed the colored kind of hero signal out to that. I assume the VTR person as well. Correct. For making sure that was up everywhere it needed to be.
Yeah, so that'll typically, for on the show that I'm on now, that the VTR person is doing streaming, so like I'm feeding him a colored feed, so that way for both A and B cameras, sometimes C camera or quad split, and then he is feeding that and streaming that directly. So any sort of changes, that's the other thing too, you have to be careful, like any sort of changes you're making live on sets, whether you're like on-offing something or that is being displayed elsewhere, unless you have it designated differently in your chain of events.
Right. Interesting. And we're starting to see a lot more of that. You mentioned streaming, and we're starting to see a lot more integration of services like Frame.io and the media asset management infrastructure, perhaps at a production company or at a post house. Have you been asked to, or have you been experimenting with conducting metadata in sort of a real-time more online way from set or shortly thereafter?
As far as I know, there's not really anything to do that in real time. Everything is more or less able to be changed after the fact, and it's not mission critical to have everything real time. It's more or less like, okay, here's everything, so here's all the data that's being sent out at the end of the day, because in the grand scheme of things, with the exception of, say, like live broadcast, I don't necessarily see a need for real-time like metadata encryption or updates or anything like that, with the exception of if you have different people working around the world on a different project and everybody needs it. That would be my assumption. But for what I'm doing in like commercials and TV, it's all getting applied once we're all done at, you know, at the end of the day. So it's like, it's going to, after we wrap, footage goes to a post house and, or Technicolor, and Technicolor is handling everything. So,
right. Including the transcoding of the camera original files and the application of those scene, shot, or take specific.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All that stuff's getting applied there. And the only time that I really handle dailies for the most part is on either a small movie or like a tier 1, tier 0 kind of thing, like independent film, or commercials where they have a turnaround time that's super fast. Like a lot of the time that I've been doing over the past couple weeks has been with commercials. That's just been like shoot really quickly, do the streaming for clients who can't be there on set because of COVID restrictions and flying in and everything like that. There's been a case where I've had a cinematographer be on the Zoom call, like telling me what they're looking for color wise. I'll make those adjustments. You can see it in real time with the Zoom call or a private link that I have. And then I can able to just apply those looks, you know, either on the spot or retroactively and make adjustments within Resolve or SilverStack Lab.
That's interesting. So and this is something that we've needed to figure out solutions for a lot. What's your favorite way of bringing the, you know, are you essentially like sharing the Pomfret preview window on the Zoom call, or?
No, actually, I'm using OBS for the most part, because for those who know me, I'm a big gamer as well. So I was big into Twitch for a long time. That was for many years. And so when we started doing all these integrations with Blackmagic Video Hubs and you know, all the object capture devices and everything like that, like it integrates seamlessly into OBS. And so for those who don't know, open broadcaster software, and I was able to just take my knowledge from all my Twitch streaming stuff and then apply that to Zoom streaming or, you know, RTMP streaming, which is exactly the same thing. It's just instead of going to Twitch's platform, you're now going to a Zoom call, and you can use the preview or output the preview from OBS directly into Zoom, or you can use it for a private web API based system or something like that. So which is
right.
Zoom's quality is not the greatest for doing like mission critical color accurate sharpness, like doing that sort of stuff. It's okay for like having a bunch of people there for who wants to just see what's going on, like for clienteles or you know, agency or something like that. But if you're looking for like, okay, what's the sharpness level, like the best looking image has been so far I've found using like AWS's platform for video streaming.
Interesting. Well, that's I think, you know, a number of kind of fascinating insights into, you know, kind of the beginning of the look creation process. Are there any other big trends that you are, you know, seeing or that you are championing that are emerging, maybe in part because of the reality of the situation we're shooting under with, you know, restrictions due to COVID and so forth?
I'm actually seeing, I don't know if anybody remembers, but like a few years ago, I would say like 5 or 6 years ago, there's this big swing that like, oh, DITs were going away. DITs are not going to be a thing, that sort of stuff. Like this is a fad, like you guys aren't going to have a job. I'm seeing the complete opposite of that now, of more people needing DITs, because not only are we integral in making sure that a cinematographer's vision is translated between what's happening on set to all the way to post, like we're also the liaison between set and post, that kind of thing. Typically the person who's talking, making sure that everything, not just on set with color and everything, but also with production, getting things squared away, making sure that there's no problems, or just helping wherever we possibly can with camera department, as well as editorial and production and just color all around. But we're also technicians, like it is in our job description, a digital imaging technician. And so we have the tech skills, and we should have the tech skills to be able to handle any sort of repairs needed, doing any sort of electronics stuff that we would possibly need. Like my quarantine project has been learning 12 volt. I've converted my entire DIT cart to 12 volt for running everything on a battery system as need be. But so I'm seeing an uptick.
I hate Hate to break the discussion. It's really some great stuff. I'm hoping it helps everybody's both pre-production process all the way through post. We're at a spot where we're due to give away $2,000 training certificate to AbelCine. We've got a quiz prepared. But before we go into that quiz, I just want to say, and I want you to watch, Charles, everybody's hands as they go like this, to thank you for all this really fantastic information. Make sure you change the view up there in the top corner from speaker view to gallery, and you'll just see a whole bunch of hands.
All right, I'll do that.
Yeah, you guys were phenomenal. Just so you know, you go to slido.com, and the hashtag we're using happens to be Colorist Mixer, and I'm hoping a screen share may show up with that, because we got about 106 people joined, 107 people joined. And right after this quiz, right after the giveaway, we're going to open up some breakout rooms, including one around this topic, including one for AbelCine, as well as one for the last session we did about freelancing and pricing your services. But just as well, I might as well point out, I think we're due to start the quiz in a second. I'm just waiting for the screen share to show up, and if not, I'll do it. But I just wanted you to see, let's see, there we go, right over my shoulder. There we go. So we also have the best shows of 2020, a chill room, and a Spanish room as well, because it's been awfully popular. And the screen share is up, outstanding. I didn't see it because it's always hidden. So let's go ahead here. We're going to start that quiz out. I believe we've got 4 questions on this day's quiz. Edwin Porter was the first to do what? Hand color his film, use the close-up shot in a scene, create movies with thousands of extras and immense budgets, put together documentary shots and studio shots. We'll wait till we get at least about 100 here. Geoff, do you know all the answers to these? Are these your questions?
They were crowdsourced from the AbelCine Brain Trust, and so I have to confess I did not know all the answers when I read them, but I do have the instructor's key.
Okay.
So
so you shouldn't vote. You shouldn't bring this. You shouldn't participate along those lines. All right. I think we've waited. Give it another couple more seconds. Yeah. Let's go ahead and let's see what we got for answers here. Let's see if hand color is the right answer. Oh, it's put together doc shots and studio shots. Wow. Hey, that doesn't mean you shouldn't keep going. There's a good chance these questions seem a little bit harder. Let's see where we go from here. In what film was the first use of synchronized soundtrack and effects rather than a pianist sitting in a theater? Don Juan, Lights in New York, The Jazz Singer, or Sunset Boulevard? Wow. You know, my Twitter handle's Film Geek, and I think I have the right answer. I think I don't want to put any weight beyond it. Geoff, I hope everybody at Abel is doing well. Say hi to Jeff Lee. Say hi to the Abel brothers for me.
Will do.
I miss seeing the offices, man.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I make it in, pretty, at least like kind of once every other week or so these days, but typically remote. But we miss that kind of that fraternization. I think like everybody does. That happened, when people like yourself and Warren and all the other luminaries and chrominaries of our industry come through.
That's a good line, chrominaries. Let's see what the winner here was. Was it? Oh, it was Don Juan. Wow. All right. This is going to be an interesting contest. We got 2 questions left. At the end of which film was a shot of a cowboy firing at the audience? The shot had nothing to do with the film or with the movie that was screened. This one was the very first uses of medium shot. Le Voyage à Travers Impossible, The Great Train Robbery, Way Down East, and The Champion. Let's see. 75. As soon as we get over that 88 number or 90 number, we can move on. 87. You still vote, still get a chance. See if you're right or wrong. All right, let's move on. Let's see. All right, let's see what the right answer was. Great Train Robbery. Here comes our last question. $2,000 training certificate coming up. Who was the first person to put 2 shots together, thus creating the concept of editing and the ability to move between scenes? David Griffith, George Melius, Carl Meyer, or Bertrand Blair. Let's see. 55, 63. We get that number over, say, 83. You got a guess on this one, Geoff? Oh, no, you have the answer key. Charles, do you have a guess on this one? This is the last one, man. So you're allowed to guess this one out loud.
My film knowledge isn't what it used to be. I'm going to go with David Griffith.
I'm going to go with Melies. Let's see. A lot of people agree with me. A lot of people agree with you. Oh, and I was right. Nice. Film Geek pulling it out. Let's go ahead. Let's see what the leaderboard. Let's see who our winner is now. Ryan Braun. Look at that. Ryan Braun. Nobody got 4 out of 4 right. That's always interesting. And did it in 36 versus the number 2 and 3 spots at 43 seconds. Thanks for playing. Congratulations, Ryan Braun.